Welcome to SecondFirst Conversations, a presentation of Second Congregational First Presbyterian Church in downtown Rockford, Illinois, as we serve downtown Rockford and beyond with God's grace. I am your host, Phil Davidson, along with Greg Makulec, and I am blessed to be a member of this loving church family. Our guest today is a recently added new member to our church family, our senior pastor, Martha Langford. Welcome, Martha.
Thank you, Phil.
You know, life is a journey. We've heard that many times. And so tell us about your journey, about your path that led you to ministry.
Okay, so I often talk about this in terms of the Family Circus cartoon. You may have remembered those places where Billy was going from point A to point B and went all over the place. And that might best describe my path into ministry. But I grew up in the Houston area. I was the youngest of 5 kids. And when I finished school and went to college, my thought is that I would be in the military post-graduation until retirement. That was the plan. Didn't quite work out that way. So I graduated and did service in the military. I did 5 years on active duty in the United States Army and then a year in the individual ready reserves. And during that time, I realized that that was not my vocation. So I started again. I returned to my hometown and began kind of putzing about for work. But I also began working with my local congregation and later with the local presbytery as a volunteer and a church leader. And I was working with the Presbytery of New Covenant as a liaison to one of our racial ethnic congregations, our Indian Presbyterian Church. And the pastor, who is a friend of mine and a friend of the family and part of the family, said, you know, Martha, you really ought to consider going into ministry. And there was this thing that the local seminary in Austin was doing. They had a extension program in Houston. And so she finally gave me a brochure and said, you need to think about taking a class and taking it for credit. And so I did. I took a class and I took it for credit, and I realized that this was my tribe. And that started a journey that began in 1996 that took about 11 and a half years to get to 2007, which was when I was ordained. So I did classes one at a time. I had a family. My daughter was growing up. And when we finally got to the right spot, my daughter graduated from high school, and we both went to school. I went to seminary, and she went to college. Just a lot of fun finding the people with whom you really resonate, finding the work that you really resonate with, because I'd done a little bit of everything. There was military, there was working with my brother-in-law doing electrical and communications design and also being his IT person. There were just time as a staff member in the Presbytery of New Covenant to do communications for them, which is where my view on the broader church really came into play.
So you mentioned that you and your daughter were going to school at the same time.
We were.
Did you help each other with your homework?
No, but my granddaughter got to watch me do homework while she was here last week. She was like, Granny, why do you have homework? And I had to explain to her I was taking a class.
It doesn't end with school.
Yeah, so that was during Granny Camp.
That was during Granny Camp when my granddaughter was here. And that's been another wonderful thing about being in the area. My daughter and her husband, my granddaughter, are only 3.5 hours away. It's an easy drive. So
well,
I've
seen them.
It's better than
trying to do it from Texas, right?
Absolutely. I've seen them twice now in 2 months. So that's just beautiful.
Wonderful.
You know, I feel like that time in the military and in industry, even though maybe that wasn't really your thing, it does seem like it has added to your value in some way. I mean, don't you feel like that's given you some extra, capabilities when it comes to your job as a pastor?
Well, and I'm taking a class right now because this is a federated congregation. I'm taking a UCC history and polity class. And this week we are talking about leadership characteristics of pastoral leaders in the now and in the future, and what are the characteristics we think are most valuable, and whether or not we learned them in seminary. And the leadership aspects from military service and the aspects of working in a small business were incredibly valuable. And it's not something that you learn in ministry. It's something that you bring with you. And so I feel like nothing was wasted. Even though I did a real circuitous path, nothing was wasted. So it's been a great time getting to hear. You'll hear me use the phrase, someone will go, well, how do you know that? And I like to say, a misspent youth.
Hardly misspent, I think. But
yeah. But like I said, God doesn't waste any of that. And that's been true the entire time I've been in ministry. God's kind of gathered up everything that I've ever done and made it useful to the work I'm currently engaged in. And this is no exception. Now, I've served in a pastoral residency, a Lilly Foundation pastoral residency in Chicago. That was the very first thing I did after seminary. And spent 2 years there. And I spent some time as an associate pastor, 10 years, in a church in Rochester, New York. I needed to go back to Texas, so I served as a solo pastor in a smaller membership congregation in rural Texas for 5.5 years, and then found my way here. And Phil, you and Greg both can talk just a little bit about the process that you guys saw.
Right, both of us were on the search.
Yes. So you were on this weaving path, and somehow our path, which kind of wove around sometimes as well on the search committee, eventually those two paths came together.
Well, and it's one of those kind of things, you don't know that God works through paperwork, but sometimes I think God works through paperwork and through, the equivalent of a dating service, the matching service that the Presbyterian Church has, that you guys obviously submitted this congregation's search information to, and I was active in, and one day your information appeared on my screen as a possibility.
And then your information appeared on ours.
Yes. And then
there were definitely things that made you stand out.
Exactly, right. So I guess the question now is, all right, your path joined our path. Why did you choose us? Why did you accept our invitation?
So the first thing you do when one of those pops up is you begin to crawl over every bit of material that you can get your hands on. So not only the information that you guys put into the description of the church, the profile, but also the website and the other places where the church is mentioned. And I was really heartened to find a church that had, such strong ethic for ministry to the community around them and a downtown presence, for a progressive stance on many things, for a place where you'd worked out that intersection between Presbyterian parts and the UCC parts. Those kinds of things were really exciting, but particularly the strength of outreach and the strength of service into the community were the initial pieces. And then I got to talk to you, and that helps as well.
We didn't scare you then.
No, it was, those were great conversations. I think we had 2 Zoom meetings before we did the meeting in person. And the fact that we could laugh about my first trip to try to get here to see you in person.
Oh, my goodness. What a story that is.
I ended up getting stuck and snowed in Dallas, Texas.
In Texas, of all places.
Yes, you did.
Not Chicago, but in Dallas. And so the perseverance to make that process work together was really kind of unique. And also the strength of compassion for days that were not going well. I was afraid to text Jay Baker ever again.
But I'll tell you something, Martha. On the committee, we all kind of looked at each other as this was happening, and we said, well, if there was ever a test of how somebody functions under pressure, this is it right here.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we were, we'll always remember that.
Yes.
We'll always remember that. And then you came into town for your personal visit, your first personal, finally got here. And I think we all kind of realized there was a chemistry there.
Well, and I appreciated kind of the introduction to town that you guys gave me. You know, both the high points of town and just a good overview of what Rockford was like, kind of from soup to nuts, and just a real appreciation for, you know, the kinds of things I was finding out about the city itself and our place in it. That was just a really great visit, and has later helped me find my way in some interesting with the road construction in town.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I really appreciated the time spent with other members of the committee who actually helped me drive around to look at the places I was thinking about moving into when I got here. And just the more time I spent with the calling committee and its representation of both the leadership and the membership of the church, the more I felt that this was truly, you know, a calling, a vocational calling to be here.
Well, we felt the same way, obviously. Okay, so now you're here. Let's continue on the journey. Now we need to look, okay, now what? What paths within our church and community do you see us venturing down?
Well, and I've spent the first few months here trying to get to know people, to do one-on-ones with the leadership of the church, to meet the pastors who are in congregations similar to ours in the downtown area, and the organizations that we do collaborative ministry with, and just really get the feel of the lay of the land. And in that, some of it is to begin to energize our folks to ask the kind of reflective questions that let you not only accomplish ministry, but see what comes next, see what has kind of lost its steam and is time to retire for at least a while, and to see where the possibilities are, things that are bubbling up from within the congregation or from within the community. So that's just been a beautiful thing. We are starting, even as we speak, work to bring Becky Irby back as an outreach associate to work specifically with the Overnight Cafe and with Jeremiah Development. That will be coming before council soon, and pulling together a kind of a prototype board to work with her.
That's exciting.
Yes.
So that we can possibly expand some of that ministry. So those are the kind of things that are underway.
Well, I think we should mention, too, anybody that's listening out there, Becky Irby was our acting senior pastor before Martha got here, and before that she was an associate pastor here. And she was in the church for over 25 years.
Many years in various
capacities. Many years,
yeah.
yes. So that's real exciting to hear that.
Well, and we figured that if we could do something similar to what the Presbyterians call a parish associate, which is where a lot of retired pastors find themselves serving, that particular focus would make a great fit.
Wow.
And so we're just really happy that's beginning to work its way through.
Well, that's terrific. Well, thank you, Martha. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
And you're listening to SecondFirst Conversations, a podcast series from Second Congregational First Presbyterian Church in downtown Rockford, Illinois. Our podcasts seek to educate, inform, and show God's grace. Colossians 4:6 says, "Let your conversation be always full of grace, seasoned by salt, so that you may know how to answer everyone." This is Phil Davidson along with Greg Makulec. So long, and thank you for listening.
SecondFirst Conversations is produced and hosted by Phil Davidson, edited by Greg Makulec. We'd like to thank the Rockford Public Library for use of their excellent recording studio. Our theme music is Vineyard by the Asian Jazz Cafe, and it's courtesy of Universal Studios. To listen to more podcasts or view Sunday services live, visit our YouTube channel, SecondFirst Rockford, or visit us at our website, www.secondfirst.org.